A biting wind swept across the empty hills as Finnegan Finn Hughes drove the battered old pickup up the final rise, Oakhaven Farm coming into view at last. The stone house crouched beneath a heavy Yorkshire sky, gray on gray, battered by rain and time. Ivy clung to the crumbling walls, windows streaked with grime, every inch of the place echoing with memories Finn wasn't sure he wanted to face. He let the engine idle, hands resting on the wheel for a moment, unwilling to move. The farm had always looked stern from a distance, but now, after his father's death, it felt downright desolate, a monument to everything left unsaid between them. He killed the engine. The silence that followed was immense, broken only by the restless caw of a rook and the thump of his boots on gravel. Inside, the house smelled of cold ash and old wool. He set his duffel by the door, lingering in the hallway, where faded family photos glared down at him with unsmiling eyes. Finn wondered if his father, Arthur Hughes, had ever stood here like this, uncertain, feeling both owner and stranger at the same time. Finn wandered room to room, the chill seeping into his bones. Dust motes floated in shafts of pale light. On the kitchen table, bills sat in a pile, unpaid, unopened, threatening. He found his father's mug by the sink, rim-stained, as if waiting for the man who would never return. Finn picked it up, hands trembling, and stared out the window at the fields running wild with weeds. The weight of everything, this place, his family's legacy, the silence, settled on his shoulders, heavier than any gear he'd carried in the army. He shivered, jaw clenched. The world outside was colorless, a soggy tapestry of stone and earth, sheep moving like ghosts through the mist. In the living room, the old mantel clock ticked unevenly, time out of joint. Finn tried to light the fireplace, but the kindling was damp and refused to catch. Frustrated, he tossed the matches aside and dropped onto the sagging sofa, the smell of mildew rising up around him. He stared at the ceiling, mind racing through memories that wouldn't settle. He remembered coming here as a kid, summers spent trailing after his father, always trying and failing to impress the old man. Arthur was a man of few words, stern, proud, expecting strength, but rarely showing kindness. When Finn joined the army, Arthur hadn't even tried to stop him. The last time Finn had seen him alive, they'd argued about repairs. The roof, the broken tractor, all the things Finn swore he'd fix next time. Now, next time was gone. The grief was sharp, but underneath it ran something colder, guilt, anger, the ache of unfinished business. He pulled his phone from his pocket, considered calling someone, anyone. But who? He'd drifted from old friends, and the neighbors, though kind enough, kept their distance. Finn's world had shrunk to this: a crumbling house, a pocket full of regrets, and an inheritance that felt more like a curse than a blessing. Night fell early, darkness pressing against the windows. The wind rose, rattling the loose panes, making the whole house seem to sigh and shudder. Finn tried to sleep, but the quiet was too loud. Every creak set his nerves on edge, every flicker of shadow dragging him back to sandstorms and gunfire, places he'd fought to forget. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, body rigid, listening for threats that weren't there. At 3 a.m., a sudden bang from the barn sent him bolt upright, breath ragged. Just the wind, he told himself. Just the wind. By dawn, he was already up, pacing the cold floorboards. The farm needed everything: fences mended, sheep checked, machinery coaxed back to life. The list of repairs was endless, and Finn barely knew where to begin. He forced himself into work, grabbing tools and tramping out to the fields. The cold stung his face, his boots slipped in mud. Every task felt monumental. One fence post rotten, the next bent. Sheep huddled and wary in the wet. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, making every step feel heavier. He tried to focus, tried to keep his mind on the present, on wire, on wood, on the hard logic of fixing things. But his mind kept slipping. He'd catch himself staring into the distance, remembering the blank faces of men lost in the desert, the way loss could sneak up on you when you least expected it. Sometimes the noise in his head drowned out everything else. He flinched at loud sounds, lost his train of thought, felt the world narrowing to a tunnel of memory and dread. At midday, rain started falling harder, drumming on the tin roof of the shed as Finn struggled with a stubborn bolt on the tractor. His hands shook. He swore under his breath, the frustration boiling over. For a second, he smashed the wrench onto the metal. Just once. Just enough to make his knuckles sting. He squeezed his eyes shut, breathed in, breathed out. The anger faded, leaving only exhaustion. He forced himself to keep moving, but every little problem felt like proof he wasn't enough, that he couldn't fix what was broken, couldn't live up to the Hughes name. The neighbors offered advice, but he saw the pity in their eyes, heard the whispers in the village shop. Finn Hughes, back from war, can't even keep a roof over his head. He avoided their gaze, kept to himself, letting the loneliness wrap tighter around him each day. As evening settled in again, Finn sat on the back steps, mud-caked and aching, watching the fog curl along the hedgerows. Somewhere, an owl called, a low, mournful sound. He rested his head in his hands, feeling the tears prick, but refusing to let them fall. He didn't know how to grieve for a man who'd never let him close, didn't know how to be the last Hughes left at Oakhaven. He only knew he couldn't give up, no matter how lost he felt. Behind him, the house waited, broken, but still standing. Ahead, the land rolled out to the horizon, wild and wide and full of unknowns. Finn drew a long breath, squared his shoulders, and went inside, closing the door on the night. In the deep hush of the old farmhouse, he made himself a silent promise. He'd find a way through, no matter what it took. And outside, in the darkness at the edge of the fields, something moved. Watching, waiting, as if the land itself wasn't done with Finn Hughes just yet. The second morning at Oakhaven arrived gray and biting, wind slapping the loose slate on the roof, the scent of rain soaked into every stone. Finn woke early, jaw clenched from dreams that never quite left him. He'd slept fitfully, wrapped in the scratchy wool blanket his father favored, haunted by shadows that pressed close and refused to let him rest. The silence of the farmhouse felt heavier than ever, and the chill in the air seemed to reach right down into his bones. He poured black coffee into his father's old mug, the familiar feel of ceramic grounding him as he stared out the kitchen window. Beyond the glass, the fields rolled away into mist, edges blurring into nothingness. It might have been beautiful once, but all Finn saw were broken fence lines, waterlogged pasture, and sheep clustered beneath a crooked hawthorn, their coats muddied and matted. He forced himself into boots, pulled on his jacket, and stepped outside. The cold slapped him awake, mud sucking at his heels as he made his way toward the lower field. The old tractor sat half buried in weeds, rust eating through the paint. Finn cursed softly as he checked the oil, fingers stiff from the cold. The engine coughed, wheezed, then died. He slammed the hood shut, breath coming in sharp, frustrated bursts. For hours he worked, mending a gate, hauling a broken water trough, checking the flock for signs of illness. The tasks were endless, each one just a little beyond what he could manage alone. By midday, the sky darkened and rain began to spit down, driving Finn to the shelter of the barn. He leaned against a post, wiping sweat from his brow, and tried not to think about the mounting bills or the repairs he had no idea how to afford. A sudden sound caught his ear, the clatter of hooves on stone, quick and irregular. Finn tensed, heart thudding. He peered out through the cracked barn door, scanning the field. At first he saw nothing. The sheep huddled, unmoving, and the world was silent save for the wind and rain. Then, at the far edge of the boundary, where the stone wall met the open moor, he saw movement, a shape emerging from the fog. It was a horse. Not one of the neighbors' sturdy workhorses, nor the glossy animals from the riding school in the next valley. This one was small, compact, its coat thick and dark as the storm clouds above. Its mane hung tangled and wild, and even from a distance, Finn could see the limp in its gait, the left foreleg lifted gingerly as it picked its way across the wet grass. Finn watched, transfixed. The horse stopped just beyond the last fence post, head raised, eyes wide and alert. For a moment, man and animal simply stared at one another, two creatures battered by circumstance, both clinging to the margins of the world. Finn took a step forward, careful and slow, but the horse only flicked an ear, watching. He crouched down, hands resting on his knees. "Hey there," he called softly, voice rough with disuse. "You're a long way from anywhere safe, aren't you?" The horse didn't bolt. Instead, it shifted its weight, testing its wounded leg, nostrils flaring as it considered him. Finn recognized the look, wary, stubborn, refusing to show weakness. He stayed where he was, heart hammering, unsure if he wanted to approach or simply stand there forever, not breaking the fragile spell. After a long moment, the horse snorted, tossed its head, and limped away, disappearing back into the mist that blanketed the moor. Finn felt something inside him ache, a sharp, unexpected surge of empathy. He knew what it was to run wounded, to keep moving because stopping meant facing everything you'd rather forget. That night, Finn sat by the kitchen fire, wrapped in his father's old sweater, thinking about the animal. He found himself wondering how it had been injured, whether it was lost or had always been wild, surviving on the moors with nothing but its own wits. He poured another mug of coffee, staring into the flames, and thought about how he too was limping, on the inside, where no one could see. The next day, Finn saw the horse again, this time near to the stream that cut through the lower pasture. It drank cautiously, one ear cocked toward him as he watched from behind a stand of gorse. The wound on its leg was clearer now, a ragged cut, crusted with mud but not bleeding fresh. Finn considered his options. He had neither the skill nor the equipment to treat a wild horse, but he couldn't just ignore the animal's suffering. He walked back to the house and rummaged through the pantry, finding a bag of oats. He scattered a handful near the place where he'd seen the horse last, then retreated a safe distance. Hours later, when he returned, the oats were gone, and fresh hoof prints marked the mud. Over the next few days, this strange dance continued, Finn leaving out small offerings, the horse sometimes accepting, sometimes vanishing for a day or two, but always returning. Each encounter felt like a gift, a brief break in the endless monotony of loneliness and repair. Finn started calling the horse Solace, the word coming to him one evening as he watched the animal graze at the edge of dusk. The villagers noticed a change. Old Mrs. Taylor from the next farm over mentioned seeing Finn out by the moor at all hours, watching the wild horse. The postman joked that Finn finally had company, even if it was four-legged and shy. Finn laughed it off, but inside he felt something shifting, a sense of purpose, however small, threading through his days. But with this new connection came worry. The weather worsened, and Finn feared for Solace's safety. One night, as rain lashed the windows and the house groaned in the gale, Finn lay awake, listening to the wind howl over the hills, wondering if Solace had found shelter, if he'd make it through the night. Morning brought a lull in the storm, and with it, fresh hoof prints near the oat pile. Relief swept through Finn so powerfully he almost wept. He crouched in the mud, running his hand over the prints, feeling a kinship stronger than he'd known since his army days. It was as if Solace was drawing him back to life, one cautious step at a time. And Finn realized, with a start, that for the first time since coming home, he was beginning to look forward, not back. The wounded, wary creature at the edge of his world had become more than just a symbol of the wildness of the moor. Solace was a living, breathing chance for connection, a reminder that broken things, given patience and care, could find their way to healing. As Finn stood and brushed the mud from his hands, he caught sight of Solace watching him from the shadows, eyes dark and wise. The wind carried a promise through the grass, not of easy answers, but of hard-won hope. For both of them, the journey was just beginning. The Yorkshire mornings had always been unpredictable, but lately, Finn felt as if the land itself was watching him. Every shift in the wind, every ripple in the long grass hinting at something just out of sight. Days blurred together in a pattern of rain and half-light. But something had changed. Ever since the appearance of the wild horse he'd named Solace, Finn's routine carried a new, restless anticipation. He found himself waking before sunrise, listening for the distant clatter of hooves or the snort of a horse just beyond the hedgerows. Sometimes he spotted Solace near the stream or grazing at the far edge of a field, never close enough to touch, always watching him with that mixture of caution and curiosity. One morning, Finn finished his chores early and walked along the overgrown fence line bordering the moor. The fog was thick, swallowing the world in a damp hush. As he reached a bend in the path, he saw Solace, half hidden among the tall reeds. The horse's coat was streaked with mud, the wound on its leg looking a little better, though it still limped. Finn slowed his steps, dropping to a crouch at a respectful distance. He spoke in low tones, telling Solace about the farm, about his frustrations with the tractor, about the memories that haunted the house at night. He didn't expect the horse to understand, but the act of speaking out loud, of being witnessed, felt strangely comforting. Sometimes Solace seemed to listen, sometimes he turned away, as if beckoning Finn to follow. That day, Solace lingered longer than usual. As Finn refilled a water trough, he noticed the horse watching him intently, then glancing out toward the wild open moor, as if urging him to notice something. Finn looked, but saw only swirling mist and scattered rocks. "You trying to show me something?" Finn murmured. "Or you just want me to keep talking?" A breeze gusted, and Finn heard a faint clinking from the far side of the fence. Curious, he walked to the spot where Solace stood, placing his hand lightly on a fence post. The horse took a few tentative steps toward the moor, pausing every so often to look back. It was almost, as if he wanted Finn to come along. Finn felt a strange tingle of apprehension and wonder. He knew it was foolish to project intention onto a wild animal, but after all he'd been through, he was learning to trust his gut again. With a quick glance over his shoulder toward the distant farmhouse, he unlatched the broken gate and slipped out onto the moor, following Solace's uneven tracks. The ground underfoot was treacherous, spongy moss, slippery rocks, and sudden dips hidden by the fog. Solace moved slowly, limping but determined, always staying just far enough ahead that Finn had to watch his every step. The further they went, the more the world seemed to shrink, the boundaries of the farm vanishing, replaced by the vast, mysterious wildness of the moor. Finn's heart pounded. Each step was a choice: stay safe or risk the unknown. But something about Solace's persistence pulled him forward, and soon he found himself far from any familiar landmark. The fog thickened, swallowing the sound of his boots and the distant bleats of sheep. Suddenly, Solace stopped, ears pricked, body tense. Finn froze as well, sensing a change in the air. He heard a low, mournful sound, maybe the wind through a broken stone wall. Or perhaps something else. Solace turned his head toward a small rise just visible in the mist. Finn hesitated, anxiety gnawing at him. He wasn't superstitious, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being led, not just by the horse, but by some invisible thread tying past to present, pain to possibility. "What is it?" he whispered, stepping forward. Solace moved again, more urgently now, threading through patches of bracken and low, gnarled trees. Finn kept up, senses heightened, boots slipping on the wet earth. The landscape was unfamiliar, more rugged than the fields by the farm, with old stone walls half collapsed, hidden dips where water pooled, patches of bog ready to swallow a careless foot. A cold drizzle began to fall, soaking Finn's hair and running down his collar. He almost turned back, but then he saw Solace stop near a tangle of thorns and look back, nostrils flaring. "All right, I'm coming," Finn muttered, ignoring the voice in his head warning him about wandering the moor in bad weather. He picked his way toward the spot where Solace stood. There, just beyond the horse, the ground sloped sharply down into a hollow. Finn squinted into the gloom and caught a glimpse of something out of place, a patch of faded blue fabric snagged on a bramble, a boot print deeper than any sheep or deer would leave. Finn's skin prickled. He crouched and brushed aside the wet leaves, revealing more signs: broken branches, a water bottle, a muddy scrap of paper. Someone had been here. Recently. Solace pawed at the ground, agitated. Finn looked up, and for a heartbeat, it felt as if the entire moor was holding its breath. Suddenly, through the mist, came a faint, desperate cry. Human, not animal. Finn's military training surged back. He bolted up, following the sound, adrenaline burning away the cold and fear. Solace moved with him, keeping close. They stumbled through the bracken to where the cry grew louder. There, wedged beneath the drooping branches of a stunted tree and half covered by a torn blanket, was a woman. Pale, shaking, her face streaked with rain and mud. She looked up at Finn, eyes wide with terror and relief. "Help me," she managed, voice hoarse. "Please." Finn dropped to his knees, instincts kicking in. He checked her pulse, weak but present. She was freezing, soaked to the skin, lips tinged blue. He shrugged out of his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You're all right. You're safe now," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "My name's Finn. Can you tell me yours?" "Ellie," she whispered. "Ellie Ainsworth." Finn glanced at Solace, who stood close, watching protectively. He realized then that the horse hadn't just led him here by accident. Somehow, Solace had known, had insisted Finn follow until he found her. He fumbled for his phone. No service. The storm was rolling in, and the woman needed warmth, food, help. He glanced at the horizon, judging the distance to the farm, then back at the shivering figure in his arms. "I'm going to get you out of here," Finn promised, voice low and determined. "I won't leave you." Solace snorted softly, as if in agreement, and pressed close, shielding them both from the wind. Finn felt a surge of gratitude, for the horse, for the moor, for the strange series of choices that had led him to this moment. For the first time since his father's death, Finn felt the weight of his own pain lessen, replaced by purpose, by connection, by hope. He gathered Ellie in his arms, bracing for the long, hard walk back to Oakhaven, and with Solace at his side, began the trek home. As the rain fell and the fog swirled, Finn understood. Sometimes, when you dare to follow the wild, it leads you to exactly where you need to be. Rain lashed the moor as Finn lifted Ellie to her feet, her weight frighteningly light beneath his jacket. Her skin was cold and clammy, her breath shallow, but she clung to his arm, teeth chattering. The ground was slick and treacherous, and Finn struggled to keep them both upright as he glanced over his shoulder. Solace hovered nearby, the horse's dark form almost ghostly in the storm, a silent guardian refusing to leave their side. "We have to get you under shelter," Finn said, his voice rough with urgency. "Hold on to me, okay? We're close. I promise." Ellie nodded weakly, barely able to walk. Finn slung her arm over his shoulder and braced her against his side. Each step felt like a mile. He scanned the ridge, heart pounding, searching for anything, a hut, a stand of trees, any place to escape the wind and rain. The outline of the ruined cottage, half hidden by brambles and shadow, came into focus at the base of the hollow. Solace pawed at the earth, as if urging them onward. Finn guided Ellie down the slope, boots slipping in the mud. The cottage was in worse shape up close, roof sagging, windows shattered, the door hanging askew on rusty hinges. But any shelter was better than none. Finn kicked aside a drift of wet leaves, shoved the door open with his shoulder, and half carried Ellie inside. The air was musty and cold, thick with the scent of rot and old stone. Rainwater trickled down one wall, pooling on the cracked flagstones. A toppled chair lay near the hearth, and the remnants of a faded curtain fluttered in the draught. Finn eased Ellie to the floor, stripping off his jacket and wrapping it around her. "Stay with me," he said, kneeling at her side. "What happened? Are you hurt anywhere else?" She shook her head, shivering uncontrollably. "I slipped. Hit my head. Got stuck. Couldn't get warm. I thought," her voice cracked, "I thought I wouldn't make it out here." "You're safe now," Finn said, checking her for other injuries. A nasty bruise marred her temple, and her pulse was weak, but she seemed lucid. He rifled through her rucksack, found a battered flask of tea, and coaxed a few sips down her throat. "Thank you," she murmured, eyes fluttering shut. "Don't go to sleep. You need to stay awake." Finn glanced at the ruined fireplace and cursed under his breath. No wood, nothing dry. He stood and began to pace the room, searching for anything to help. A pile of old newspapers, a moth-eaten blanket. He wrapped the blanket around Ellie, then used his body to block the worst of the draft. He pulled out his phone, hoping for a miracle. One shaky bar flickered in the corner. Finn moved to the broken window, holding the phone up to the sky, his heart racing. He dialed 999, praying the call would go through. Emergency services. What's your emergency? Relief hit him so hard he almost dropped the phone. I have a woman, her name's Ellie. She's injured and hypothermic. We're in a ruined cottage off the moor near Oakhaven Farm. Please, you have to hurry. She's in bad shape. Stay with her, the dispatcher said. Help is on the way. Keep her warm if you can. Finn hung up, every nerve on edge. He knelt by Ellie, rubbing her arms and hands, talking to her to keep her awake. Where are you from, Ellie? Manchester, she whispered. My mother's family. This cottage belonged to them. I was looking for something. Letters, diaries. Wanted to know more about where I came from. Finn nodded, understanding the ache behind her words. I know how it feels to chase ghosts, he said softly. We'll get you out of here. Time stretched. The rain drummed on the roof. The wind howled through the gaps in the walls. Finn kept Ellie talking about the farm, about her mother, about the strange twist of fate that had brought them both to this lonely place. Solace pressed his nose to the open doorway, eyes dark with worry. Finn's mind raced, running through survival training, searching for any advantage. He wrapped the moth-eaten blanket tighter, forced Ellie to sip more tea. When she grew quiet, he squeezed her shoulder. Stay with me, Ellie. Just a little longer. Outside, headlights flickered across the moor. Finn jumped to his feet, running to the doorway, waving his arms. Over here, over here! A Land Rover bounced into view, followed by a rescue team in bright jackets. 2 medics rushed to the cottage, carrying a stretcher and a pack of emergency gear. Finn stepped aside, heart pounding as they assessed Ellie, taking her temperature, wrapping her in foil blankets, slipping an oxygen mask over her face. You found her just in time, one medic said, voice tight. Another hour, and she might not have made it. Finn nodded, numb with relief. He watched as they lifted Ellie onto the stretcher, bundled her into the back of the Land Rover, and sped away into the rain. As the taillights disappeared into the fog, Finn slumped against the doorframe, every muscle trembling. Solace nudged him, the horse's breath warm on his cheek. Finn turned, burying his hand in the animal's coarse mane. You saved her, he whispered. I would have walked right past if not for you. Solace dipped his head, eyes gentle, and stood beside Finn as the dawn began to break. Finn trudged back to the farm through the mud and rain, the world slowly shifting from nightmare to fragile hope. He changed into dry clothes, made a pot of tea, and stood by the window, watching the moor lighten beneath the rising sun. He thought about Ellie, about her search for family, about her almost being lost to the wild, about the invisible threads that tied strangers together. Later that day, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello? Finn, it's Ellie. Thank you. I'm at the hospital. The doctors say I'll be okay. Finn exhaled, relief flooding through him. That's good news. I was worried. You shouldn't have gone out there, she said softly. You saved my life. You can thank Solace, Finn replied, glancing out at the boundary where the moor met the fields. He's the one who led me to you. Maybe you should keep him close, Ellie said, a small smile in her voice. He seems to know when people are in trouble. Finn chuckled, rubbing his tired eyes. Yeah, maybe we both do. As dusk settled over Oakhaven, Finn walked the fence line, boots sinking in the sodden earth. Solace waited at the boundary, watching the horizon. Finn scratched the horse's neck, feeling the world settle around him. A little less broken, a little more whole. For the first time in a long while, Finn believed things could change. He'd found Ellie. He'd learned that, even in the loneliest places, hope could appear, unexpected, wild, and stubborn as a moorland pony. And as the stars blinked out above the ruined cottage, Finn knew he wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for every lost soul searching for shelter in the storm. The rain finally stopped, but the moor still felt dangerous, slick with mud, the wind carrying the chill of something unfinished. Finn spent the hours after Ellie's rescue in a daze, the adrenaline slowly ebbing, leaving exhaustion and a raw sense of disbelief behind. His hands trembled as he rinsed mud from his arms in the kitchen sink. Outside, Oakhaven was shrouded in fog. The sheep had retreated to higher ground, and the only sign of Solace was a single set of hoofprints vanishing toward the boundary. Finn hardly slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes. Ellie's pale face in the ruined cottage, Solace standing guard, the distant wail of sirens. He'd never felt more helpless, waiting for the rescue team, never more exposed, even compared to the worst moments of his old life. The image of Ellie slipping away haunted him. He kept checking his phone for news, clinging to the hope that she'd survive the night. When morning broke, Finn was already up, pacing the living room, mug of cold coffee in his hands. He called the hospital, heart pounding, and after what felt like hours on hold, finally reached the right ward. "She's stable," the nurse told him, her voice brisk but kind. "She's awake, asking for you." Finn's relief was so sharp it nearly dropped him to his knees. He promised to visit as soon as he could, then spent the next hour scouring his muddy clothes and cleaning himself up. The farm could wait. This couldn't. He left a note on the kitchen table, just in case. "Gone to hospital. Back soon." The drive was slow, winding through rain-slicked lanes and tiny villages, past stone walls and fields brightening under the tentative sun. Finn's mind churned with what he'd say. Would Ellie remember him? Would she blame him for not finding her sooner? Would she want to see him at all? When he arrived at the hospital, the receptionist gave him directions. Ellie's room was small, painted in cheerful colors, but the smell of antiseptic and distant machines pressed close. Ellie lay propped on a pillow, skin still pale but eyes bright, hair brushed and tucked behind her ear. An IV dripped steadily at her side. When she saw Finn, her smile was tired but genuine. "You really came?" she said softly. "You scared the hell out of me," Finn replied, managing a crooked smile. She gestured for him to sit. For a while, they just talked. Awkward at first, then easier, sharing small details that felt enormous in the hospital quiet. Ellie told him about her search for her family's history, her hope that something in the ruined cottage would answer questions she'd carried her whole life. She apologized for the trouble she'd caused. "You didn't cause anything," Finn said, shaking his head. "If it weren't for Solace, I might never have found you." "I think that horse is braver than either of us." Ellie's laugh was weak, but it filled the room with warmth. "I thought I was going to die out there," she admitted, voice trembling. "But I kept thinking, someone will come. Someone will notice. I'm gone." Finn felt a sharp pang in his chest. He understood that loneliness, waiting for rescue, not just from the elements, but from your own doubts. They spoke for hours. Finn told her about his father, about coming back to Oakhaven and the weight he couldn't shake. Ellie listened, sometimes reaching for his hand when his voice faltered. For the first time, Finn found himself talking about the war, about nights on patrol, about friends lost, about the endless feeling of being responsible for things far beyond his control. Ellie's presence, her listening without judgment, felt like a balm. The doctor came in, checked Ellie's vitals, and nodded approvingly. "She's lucky you found her when you did," he said to Finn. "Another hour, and we might be having a very different conversation." Finn squeezed Ellie's hand. "I'm just glad you're here," he said. Later that day, when Finn returned to Oakhaven, the sky had cleared and shafts of sunlight cut through the clouds. He stood in the pasture, eyes scanning the far ridge. As if on cue, Solace appeared, standing in the same spot where Finn had first seen him. The horse looked stronger, his limp barely noticeable. Finn walked toward him, heart full of gratitude. "You saved her, you know," he said. "I'll never forget that." Solace snorted, tossed his head, and trotted off into the wild, mane catching the light. Finn went back to work with a new sense of urgency. The farm needed him. But now he also felt a responsibility to Ellie, to help her finish what she'd started, to protect the place that had nearly claimed her. He fixed the last of the broken fences, cleaned the barn, and set aside time every evening to visit the ruined cottage. He started to see it not as a symbol of loss, but as a place that might hold answers. For both of them. A few days later, Ellie was discharged from the hospital. Finn picked her up, helping her into the passenger seat, and drove her back to Oakhaven. She was quiet at first, watching the moor roll past the window, but as the farmhouse came into view, she exhaled deeply. "I never thought I'd see this place again," she whispered. Finn smiled. "It's yours as much as anyone's now." He insisted she rest, making tea and toast while she settled in by the fire. They planned to visit the ruined cottage together, to look for the letters and diaries Ellie believed were hidden there. For the first time, Finn saw the farm through her eyes, haunted but hopeful, full of stories waiting to be uncovered. The next morning, with the sun bright and the air fresh from rain, Finn and Ellie set off across the moor. Solace watched them go, grazing near the boundary, a living link between what was lost and what might still be found. Finn carried a satchel of tools, and Ellie, bundled in Finn's old jacket, clutched her notebook close. When they reached the cottage, Finn pushed open the door and let the light flood in. The place was still ruined, but less threatening now. Ellie moved slowly, her hands tracing the faded wallpaper, eyes shining as she searched for clues. Finn pulled up loose floorboards, sifted through piles of debris, and together they uncovered small treasures: a rusted key, a scrap of a letter, a faded photograph showing a woman with Ellie's eyes standing beside a man in a military uniform. Each find brought new questions, but also a sense of triumph. Ellie smiled at Finn, and for a moment, the sorrow that had haunted both of them seemed to lift. "Thank you, Finn," she said quietly, tucking a photo into her notebook. "For saving me, for not giving up." Finn shook his head. "You saved me too, you know. I didn't realize how lost I was until I had someone to look for." That afternoon, as they walked back to Oakhaven, Solace followed at a distance, his wild mane rippling in the breeze. Finn glanced back, heart swelling with gratitude and hope. There was still work to do, mysteries to solve, and wounds that would take time to heal. But for the first time since coming home, Finn felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Not just fighting for survival, but building something new with someone who understood what it meant to be lost and to be found again. The following week moved with a strange, gentle rhythm, as if the storm on the moor had shifted something deep inside both Finn and Ellie. Oakhaven grew warmer, somehow, even as the wind still rattled the windows, and the rain came and went in bursts. Finn found himself waking with purpose, his mind busy with small plans, clearing the back barn, patching the leaky roof, making sure there was always a fresh pot of tea for when Ellie came downstairs, pale but stronger each morning. The day after she came home from the hospital, Ellie insisted on joining Finn in the kitchen, even if it was just to sit by the stove with a blanket over her knees. "You're still recovering," Finn told her, brow furrowed. "I won't break," Ellie replied, a small smile curving her lips. "Besides, I don't think I could stand another hour in bed. The quiet here, it's different than the city. It's full of memories." Finn nodded, understanding more than she knew. He'd spent his own share of nights lost in memory, haunted by the edges of his father's voice and the ache of old regrets. Still, something about Ellie's presence made those ghosts a little less frightening. Later that afternoon, Finn drove her into the village for supplies. The people of Stonydale greeted them with a mixture of curiosity and warmth. Word had spread about Finn's rescue of the stranger on the moor, and more than a few neighbors offered baked goods or a ride if they ever needed it. Ellie was shy, but her gratitude was sincere, and her story, a young woman searching for the truth behind her mother's family, sparked sympathetic smiles. When they returned, Ellie asked Finn to walk with her out to the boundary where the moor began. The sky was wide and blue, the grass shimmering with the last of the rain. Solace was grazing on the ridge, lifting his head as they approached, black mane blowing wild in the wind. "Do you think he knows?" Ellie asked softly. "Just how important he's become?" Finn grinned. "Maybe. Or maybe he's just hungry." They walked in silence for a time, and Finn felt something settle inside him, a quiet trust, a sense that, at last, he wasn't alone. Back at the farmhouse, they spread the items they'd recovered from the ruined cottage across the kitchen table. Ellie handled everything with reverence: the water-stained letters, the faded photograph, the fragile key, in a battered journal that looked as though it might crumble to dust with a single careless touch. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages of the journal, breath catching when she found an entry in her mother's neat script. "Look, Finn, this is from 1985. My mom talks about coming back to Blackwood Cottage after years away. She writes about her brother, my uncle, how he left for London and never returned. There's so much hurt here, so many things she never told me." Finn leaned over her shoulder, reading the lines aloud. "The cottage is smaller than I remember, but the air is thick with old promises. I wonder if I'll ever feel at home here again." A lump rose in Ellie's throat. "I never knew she felt that way. She always told me the country was just a place to visit, not to live." "People hide their pain," Finn murmured, folding the photograph carefully. "Especially from their children. Maybe she was trying to protect you from her own sadness." Ellie nodded, blinking back tears. She found a letter tucked in the back of the journal, addressed to "My dearest girl." The envelope had never been opened. Hands shaking, Ellie slid the letter free and unfolded it. Finn watched in silence, sensing the enormity of the moment. As Ellie read, tears spilled down her cheeks. The letter was a confession. Her mother apologizing for running from the past, for letting family rifts grow, for never telling Ellie about Blackwood Cottage's true place in their lives. "I wanted to spare you the wait," the letter read, "but maybe I was wrong. Maybe we only heal by sharing our stories, not burying them." Finn reached for her hand. "You found what you were looking for, didn't you?" Ellie smiled through her tears. "I think I found more than I expected." They spent the rest of the afternoon going through the remaining letters and photos. Each new piece of the puzzle brought more questions. About the war, about Finn's father's friendship with Ellie's grandfather, about the mysterious key. Ellie wondered aloud whether it fit the old chest in the ruined cottage, or perhaps something still hidden beneath the floorboards. As dusk fell, Finn lit a fire and made soup. They sat together, eating in companionable silence, the day's discoveries making the world feel at once smaller and larger. Smaller for the intimate secrets unearthed, larger for the histories that connected them. That night, Finn dreamed of the moor. He wandered through shifting mist, searching for something just beyond reach. In the dream, Solace appeared beside him, unafraid, leading him through a ruined door and into a room filled with light. When Finn woke, heart pounding, dawn was already pushing at the edges of the sky. He found Ellie in the kitchen, clutching the letter from her mother. She looked up, eyes red, but clear. "I think I know what I want to do," she said. "I want to restore Blackwood Cottage. Not to live in, at least not yet, but to make it a place where people can come, learn about the past, maybe even find a bit of peace, like a bothy for walkers, or a little museum." "What do you think?" Finn smiled. "I think it's a brilliant idea." Ellie laughed, relieved. "Will you help me?" He reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "I'd be honored. We'll do it together." They began to make plans. Ellie sketched out ideas in her notebook, ways to shore up the walls, protect the roof, display the letters, and photographs. Finn promised to talk to a local builder about what was needed, to ask around for volunteers. For the first time since he'd returned to Oakhaven, Finn felt excited about the future, about building something lasting from the ruins. The next day, they visited Dr. Emily Carter, the local vet, to ask her opinion about Solace. Emily examined the horse from a distance, watching his movement and noting his temperament. "He's not truly wild," she told Finn and Ellie. See that scar on his neck? That's an old halter mark. My guess is he was lost, or abandoned years ago. Learned to survive on his own. He'll never be completely tame, but he trusts you. Keep an eye on him, and let me know if you ever need help. Finn nodded, a wave of pride and gratitude rushing through him. Solace had become a symbol for them all, a survivor, a link between past and present, wildness and home. That evening, they walked the fields together, watching the sun dip below the hills. Ellie paused at the boundary, gazing out at the ruined cottage in the distance. "It's strange," she murmured. "I came here, searching for my family's past, but I think I've found my future instead." Finn squeezed her shoulder, hope swelling in his chest. "So have I," he said softly. As the stars kindled above Oakhaven, Finn realized the truth of it. He and Ellie were no longer lost. Their stories, broken and tangled as they were, had found a place to grow. And in the twilight, Solace lifted his head and watched them, silent and steadfast, as if giving his blessing to all that was yet to come. Oakhaven Farm woke to the sound of distant thunder. Clouds gathered along the horizon, but holding off for now, letting shafts of golden light spill over the moor. Finn rose early, muscles sore from yesterday's work, but a rare optimism humming beneath his skin. For the first time since his father's funeral, he felt momentum, a sense that the burdens he carried were becoming lighter, shared with Ellie, and, in some strange way, with Solace too. Ellie was already up, sipping tea on the back step, a notebook balanced on her knees. The sight of her, soft hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes bright even after a rough night's sleep, made Finn pause. She looked at home here now, as if the farmhouse was remembering what it was to host warmth and laughter. He joined her quietly, setting a mug beside her elbow. "Didn't sleep?" Ellie shook her head, but her smile was easy. "Too many ideas." She tapped her pen against the notebook, pages filled with sketches of Blackwood Cottage and rough plans for restoration. "I made a list of what we'll need to get started. Timber, stone, some kind of water catchment system. And help. We'll need a lot of help." Finn looked out across the fields to where the roof of Blackwood Cottage barely peeked above the bracken. "I'll ask at the pub tonight. Maybe some of the old lads remember working on a place like that." He expected nerves, but Ellie just nodded. "We can't do it alone. I want to do this right. Not just for my family, but for everyone who ever needed a place to rest, even just for a night." A sudden snort made them both turn. Solace stood just beyond the fence, black mane rippling, watching the two humans with the same steady gaze he'd held since the beginning. Ellie rose, careful, and crossed the grass to him. She held out her hand, palm open. "Good morning, you beautiful mystery." Solace didn't bolt. Instead, he leaned forward, lips brushing her palm. For the first time, he allowed her to stroke his neck, just once, before pulling away. Finn watched, a sense of awe softening the hard lines of his face. He's never let anyone that close before. Ellie turned, face glowing. "He trusts us. Or maybe he just knows we trust him." That morning, they met with Dr. Emily Carter at the edge of the property. Emily had brought her kit, and after some gentle coaxing, she managed a proper look at Solace from a few feet away. She confirmed what she'd suspected before. Solace was feral, but had known the care of people once. "He's healthy. The wound is healing well. Just keep leaving water, and don't try to trap him. He'll come as he pleases." As Emily packed up, she studied Finn. "You're doing good work here, not just with the horse, with all of it." Finn felt his face flush, unused to praise. "We're trying." Word spread quickly about their plan to restore Blackwood Cottage. That evening at the pub, Finn found himself surrounded by old neighbors and a few curious newcomers. He told them about the idea. A bothy for hikers, a museum for village history, a memorial to the families who'd lived and lost in these hills. "I remember hauling stones for that place as a lad," said Big Tom, who ran the local feed store. "If you're asking for help, you'll have it." Others offered old photographs, spare lumber, even their own hands for the heavy lifting. For the first time, Finn realized how much the village wanted a reason to gather, to remember, to belong. The news even made it onto the village Facebook group, and within a few days, a list of volunteers and a schedule for workdays began to take shape. Back at Oakhaven, Finn and Ellie made preparations. They drew up plans, set aside a room in the barn for donated tools and supplies, and scouted the safest route for bringing in materials. The farm grew busy, the air alive with anticipation. But it wasn't all progress and easy hope. The first real workday dawned gray and cold, and as Finn led the group out to the cottage, doubts crept in. The building was worse off than he remembered, roof sagging, walls bowing, floor soft in places. The volunteers hesitated, muttering about dry rot and the cost of timber. Ellie stood in the middle of the ruined room, holding the photograph of her mother. "It's not just a building," she said, voice clear. "It's a story. If we save this place, we save a piece of ourselves. And if we can't, we'll know we tried. Together." Her words settled the room. People began prying up rotten boards, stacking stone, hauling debris. Laughter echoed between the walls, and soon the ruins seemed less haunted, more hopeful. During a break, Finn wandered outside and found Solace watching from the edge of the field, as if supervising. He brought a pail of oats and set it down a respectful distance away, then sat in the grass. "You led me to Ellie," Finn said quietly. "You led me back to life. In a way. I don't know if you understand, but I'm grateful. I promise. We'll look after this place. And you too, if you want." Solace stepped forward, nuzzled the oats, then circled around behind Finn, close enough that Finn could feel the heat of his body, but not quite close enough to touch. It was enough. The silent pact was sealed. As days became weeks, the project grew. The cottage walls went up, the roof took shape, and the story of Blackwood Cottage drew in more villagers, hikers, and even journalists from the next county over. Ellie wrote updates in the village newsletter. Finn managed the supplies and scheduled the work crews. Oakhaven felt full again, not just of work and chores, but of people, laughter, and purpose. At night, Finn and Ellie sat together on the back steps, watching the sun set over the hills. Sometimes they talked about their families, their losses, their hopes. Sometimes they sat in silence, listening to the wind and the distant calls of the sheep. And always, somewhere in the twilight, Solace would appear, wild, proud, and utterly free. One night, as they watched the first stars appear, Ellie leaned against Finn's shoulder. "Do you think we'll ever finish?" she asked, a tremor of uncertainty in her voice. Finn squeezed her hand. "We'll finish. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not easily, but we'll do it. For your mother, for the village, for us." Ellie nodded, blinking away tears. "Thank you for not letting me give up." He looked at her, really looked, at the strength she'd shown, the way she'd let her wounds become wisdom instead of weakness. "Thank you for making me believe this place could be more than just a burden, for giving me something worth fighting for." In the gathering dark, Solace grazed quietly on the hill, the unspoken bond between all three stronger than ever, and beneath the surface, where old hurts lingered, Finn and Ellie found themselves healing, not by forgetting the past, but by building something new together day by day. Morning fog clung low to the hills, blurring the edges of Oakhaven as Finn and Ellie packed supplies for their biggest task yet, entering the heart of Blackwood Cottage to search for any hidden diaries, letters, or mementos Ellie's family might have left behind. The restoration crew had paused work for the weekend, leaving the two alone with the cottage's secrets. Ellie double-checked the contents of her pack: flashlight, gloves, dust masks, a crowbar, and her mother's old photograph for courage. Finn tested the strength of the new support beams they'd recently installed in the front room, grateful for the villagers' handiwork, but wary of the cottage's sagging floor. Rain had fallen the night before, making the earth soft and the air heavy with the scent of wet grass and stone. "Ready?" Finn asked, voice low. He could see the nervous excitement in Ellie's eyes. She'd been growing stronger every week, but he knew this day carried weight. Old wounds and new hopes, all tangled together. Ellie nodded, pulling her jacket tight. If anything tries to eat us in there, promise you'll fight it off? Finn grinned, the first real smile he'd felt in days. Only if you promise to write my heroic obituary. They made their way down the path, Solace watching from a nearby rise. The horse didn't approach, but he followed at a distance, as if he sensed the gravity of their errand. The wind stirred, carrying the distant bleat of sheep and the faint echo of a memory. Ellie's mother laughing, Finn's father calling for a missing tool, the past and present weaving together in the morning hush. Inside, the cottage felt colder, shadows pooling in every corner. Light from the broken windows slanted across the debris, splintered beams, fallen plaster, piles of damp leaves where the roof had given way. Ellie's footsteps echoed on the bare boards, a reminder of how fragile everything here still was. They started in the front parlor, where the walls bore watermarks and scrawled notes from generations past. Ellie ran her fingers along the woodwork, whispering names she'd found in her mother's journal. Finn checked for any loose floorboards, prodding carefully until one gave way with a hollow thud. "Here," he said, kneeling. He pried up the board, revealing a shallow cavity packed with dust and brittle paper. Ellie crouched beside him, heart pounding as she drew out a tin box, its lid rusted but intact. Her hands shook as she pried it open. Inside were a handful of photographs, her mother as a girl, a faded letter in looping cursive, and a pressed flower, perfectly preserved. Ellie gasped, tears springing to her eyes. Finn rested a steady hand on her back as she read the letter aloud, her mother's voice trembling from beyond the grave. "If you are reading this, it means you have come back. I hope you found what you needed, even if it wasn't here, in these walls." Finn felt the air shift, an old hurt easing, a door opening between yesterday and today. "She wanted you to come home," he said quietly. Ellie nodded, wiping her eyes. "She wanted me to forgive her. Maybe to forgive myself, too." They spent hours searching every inch of the cottage, moving methodically from room to room. The kitchen yielded an old recipe book tucked behind a loose brick, its pages spattered with grease and penciled notes about birthdays and village fairs. The tiny upstairs bedroom, floors creaking dangerously beneath their feet, hid nothing but a cracked mirror and a single child's shoe. Every object felt precious, charged with the lives of those who'd passed through. As the afternoon sun warmed the cottage, Finn spotted something odd in the far corner, a patch of floor that looked slightly different, the boards newer than those around them. He knelt, pried at the edges, and the panel lifted away to reveal a small space beneath. Inside was a battered tin, heavier than the first. Finn passed it to Ellie, who hesitated, breath caught in her throat. She opened it slowly, revealing a bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. The top letter was addressed to "My dearest Robert," and the date, 1944, made Finn's heart jump. These were wartime letters, written by Ellie's grandmother, to a man she never mentioned in her journals. Ellie read aloud, "I do not know if you will ever return from the war, but I will wait for you here, in the place where the moor meets the sky." Finn squeezed her shoulder as her voice broke. "You're not alone in carrying old wounds, Ellie. Our families were shaped by war, by secrets, by longing." Ellie nodded, and they fell into a companionable silence, the weight of the past finally shifting into something gentler. The light was starting to fade when Finn suggested they search the attic. The narrow stairs groaned under their weight, and dust motes swirled in the golden beam of Finn's flashlight. Ellie coughed, swatting at cobwebs as they pushed aside trunks and boxes. At the very back, Finn found a small chest with an iron lock. Ellie's heart skipped. She'd found an old key with her mother's things. She fit the key in the lock, twisted, and with a creak, the lid swung open. Inside were more photographs, a bundle of ration books, and a child's diary. Ellie leafed through the pages, tears running freely now. "It's all here. My grandmother's childhood, her fears, her dreams." Finn watched her with pride and sorrow mingling. "You brought all of this back to life, Ellie. You gave your family a voice again." She hugged the diary to her chest, nodding. "I want to share this. Not just for me, but for everyone who needs to know that forgiveness is possible. That even in the darkest places, there are stories waiting to be told. They packed their finds carefully, hauling the boxes and bundles downstairs as the light faded from the windows. Outside, Solace waited, his patient gaze welcoming them home. As they stepped into the fading day, Ellie looked back at the cottage, its walls battered but standing. "It's not just a house, is it?" "It's a promise." Finn squeezed her hand. "A promise kept, finally." That night, they spread their discoveries on the farmhouse table, cataloging everything for the museum they would create. The past was no longer a burden, but a bridge, linking grief to hope, loss to love. And as darkness fell and Solace grazed quietly under the moon, Finn and Ellie realized they'd done more than uncover family secrets. They'd uncovered a future, built from courage, from kindness, from the wild persistence that had drawn them both home. Oakhaven was quiet the next morning, the world washed clean by gentle rain. Sunlight sparkled in droplets along every blade of grass, and the air smelled of earth and fresh beginnings. Finn found himself up early, watching Ellie in the kitchen as she moved between stacks of old letters, diaries, and photographs. She looked tired but luminous, like someone who'd spent a night in conversation with ghosts and found, to her own surprise, that they were kind. A kettle whistled on the stove. Ellie poured tea for them both, and Finn joined her at the table, where their discoveries from Blackwood Cottage were spread out in careful order. The wartime letters, the diary, the faded photograph of her grandmother in a white dress, all the fragile evidence of lives once lived in the shadow of these hills. Neither spoke for a while. Finn read over a letter from Ellie's grandmother, marveling at the mix of hope and heartbreak woven through her words. Outside, the sheep wandered across the wet pasture. Solace appeared at the fence, his dark coat shimmering, and gave a soft, low whinny. Finn caught Ellie's smile. She'd started calling the horse their guardian, a wild spirit watching over them all. At last, Ellie broke the silence. "There's so much here, Finn, so much I never knew. I keep thinking about the woman my grandmother wrote to. The man she loved. The brother she lost. The way the war changed everything for her. And then my mother. Running from this place. Never telling me why." Finn nodded. "We can't ever know the whole truth. But we can honor their stories. You've already brought so much to light. Ellie, you're giving them a voice." She reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "I couldn't have done it alone." They spent the morning cataloging everything, making notes for the small museum they planned to create at Blackwood Cottage. Each letter and photo sparked conversation about resilience, about the cost of silence, about the ways history repeats, and how it might finally be healed. By midday, a knock at the door startled them. It was Big Tom and Mrs. Taylor from the village, arms laden with more boxes and a tin of biscuits. "We heard you're collecting old things for the cottage," Tom announced, dropping his box on the table with a thud. "I've got photos from the Harvest Festival, and Maureen found a recipe card in her attic. Must be from the 1950s. Ellie's eyes filled with grateful tears. Mrs. Taylor hugged her, murmuring, "You're making all our memories matter, dear. Thank you for not letting them be forgotten." Word spread, and in the days that followed, more villagers arrived with stories, trinkets, and family treasures. Someone unearthed an old brass compass, another a stack of ration books. The kitchen became a place of reunion, laughter, and sometimes tears, generations connecting over battered keepsakes and tales told late into the evening. Finn marveled at the change in himself. The pain that once felt like a locked door now seemed a threshold, one he could cross, if he was brave enough, not by running from the past, but by standing with it, looking it in the eye, and choosing to build something new. Ellie noticed the difference, too. One afternoon, after a group of hikers stopped by for tea and a tour of the budding museum, she found Finn outside repairing the barn roof, whistling to himself. "You look lighter," she said, shielding her eyes from the sun. He grinned. "Maybe I am. Or maybe I just finally know what all this is for." She joined him, hands tucked into her coat. "You know, I used to think closure was about finding answers. But now, I think it's about making meaning out of what we do find, about giving all the broken pieces a place in our lives. Finn nodded, considering her words. It's not about erasing the scars, is it? It's about letting them be part of the story. They stood together, looking out at the moor. Solace grazed nearby, and a pair of swallows swooped low over the grass, sunlight flashing on their wings. The peace in that moment felt earned, hard-won. That evening, they gathered everything, letters, photographs, mementos, and arranged them in the parlor, preparing for the next day's open house at Blackwood Cottage. Ellie typed up a brief history of her family in the cottage, weaving in the stories they'd uncovered. Finn polished a battered brass plaque and hung it by the cottage door. Ainsworth's Rest, a place for stories, old and new. The next morning, the village gathered in force. The bothy's walls still smelled of fresh paint and new timber, but the air was alive with anticipation. People wandered from room to room, reading letters and marveling at the old photos. Some found their own faces, younger versions caught in black and white. A wedding, a harvest, a victory parade after the war. Ellie guided a group of children around, telling them about the girl who hid her diary in the attic and the grandmother who wrote letters to a soldier far away. We're all part of this, she told them. Every family, every story, that's what makes this place home. Finn found himself in conversation with Mrs. Taylor about Arthur Hughes, his own father. He learned stories he'd never heard, the way Arthur fixed a neighbor's roof in the middle of a blizzard, the time he organized a secret Christmas Eve party for the village children during the leanest year. He wasn't always an easy man, Mrs. Taylor admitted, but he cared. Maybe he just didn't know how to show it. Finn felt a surge of gratitude. For so long he'd held onto his father's silence as proof of absence. Now he saw it differently. Love that was clumsy, but real all the same. When the crowd thinned and dusk crept in, Ellie and Finn walked back to Oakhaven, the path glowing golden in the low light. Solace trotted ahead, tail high. They followed, steps slow, content. Back at the farmhouse, Finn made tea while Ellie thumbed through her mother's old diary, a smile tugging at her lips. They spoke quietly, sharing hopes for the cottage, for the museum, for what their lives might look like now, leaves woven together from all the torn threads of the past. You know, Ellie said, I always thought of myself as a wanderer. Never thought I'd find a place that felt like home. Finn looked at her, the truth of it shining in his eyes. Maybe home isn't a place. Maybe it's what we build together, with forgiveness, with stories, with the courage to stay, even when it's hard. She nodded, squeezing his hand. Thank you for staying, Finn. For not turning away when it hurt. He smiled, voice steady. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you and for Solace. In the yard, the horse raised his head, ears flicking toward the window as if he understood every word. That night, under a sky freckled with stars, Finn and Ellie sat side by side, feeling the past at peace and the future wide open. The museum was just beginning, the farm still rough, and their hearts still healing. But for the first time, they believed they could weather whatever storms might come. They had learned that the most precious legacy isn't land or letters, but love, and the chance to begin again. The morning of the grand opening dawned clear and bright, sunlight washing over the hills and chasing away the last wisps of fog that clung to Oakhaven's stone walls. Finn was awake before sunrise, nerves humming beneath his calm as he brewed coffee in the old farmhouse kitchen. The table was covered with boxes, polished silverware for the tea table, a stack of programs Ellie had printed with trembling hands, and a basket of wildflowers she'd picked at first light. The air felt charged, like the moment before a race or a storm, full of hope and the faint ache of letting go. Ellie appeared in the doorway, hair tumbling around her shoulders, wearing a soft blue dress that made her eyes seem brighter than ever. She moved with a quiet confidence that had been growing stronger each week. You ready? She asked, voice gentle but laced with excitement. Finn smiled. I'm ready if you are. They walked the path together, past the sheep drowsing in the meadow, past the boundary where Solace stood in the early light, grazing and glancing up at them as they passed. He'll come, you know, Ellie whispered. He always does, when it matters. The bothy, Ainsworth's Rest, looked transformed. The new roof gleamed, the stonework solid, the windows bright. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of freshly sanded timber and wildflowers. Photographs hung on the walls. Young men in army uniforms, girls with ribbons in their hair, harvest dances and wedding feasts, and a faded snapshot of Ellie's mother, laughing in the sun. On one table, the letters and diaries were displayed behind glass, open to pages of longing and homecoming. There was a small plaque above the hearth, a place for stories, old and new, for all who wander and all who return. By mid-morning, villagers began to arrive. Mrs. Taylor with her famous scones, Big Tom in a jacket that looked borrowed from another era, Dr. Carter smiling shyly with her hands full of fresh apples. Hikers stopped in, muddy and curious, surprised to find warmth and welcome on the edge of the moor. Ellie guided the first guests from room to room, telling the stories she'd pieced together from 100 scraps of memory. The lost brother, the soldier's letters, the grandmother's hope. She spoke without notes, her voice growing steadier with each question, each memory handed down and set gently on the table for others to hold. Finn moved among the guests, making tea, answering questions about the restoration, listening as neighbors pointed out faces in photographs and shared their own stories, of hardship and laughter, of loss and unexpected joys. For years, Finn had believed he didn't belong in this village, that he was only passing through, a ghost among the living. But today, with Ellie's hand in his and the weight of gratitude heavy in his chest, he felt something different, something like home. After lunch, the crowd gathered outside in the sunshine. Ellie stood at the steps, voice ringing clear. I came here to find my family's past, and instead I found all of you. This place is for every one of us, for those who left, for those who returned, and for those just passing through. Thank you for helping us bring it back to life. There was applause and a few tears, and for a long moment everyone stood quietly, heads bowed to the breeze that moved through the wildflowers and stirred the leaves on the old trees. Solace appeared then, standing at the edge of the yard, mane lifted by the wind. He watched the gathering in silence, then bent to graze, content. Someone pointed, and children crept closer, whispering about the wild horse who'd saved the day. As the sun dipped low, the crowd began to drift away. Finn and Ellie sat on the steps, feet touching, shoulders pressed together. They watched as Solace wandered the far field, stopping now and then to glance back. The sky glowed pink and orange, the world shimmering with the promise of summer. Ellie took Finn's hand, turning to face him. Do you ever wonder how things might have been different if you'd never come back? He nodded. All the time. But I think the past brought us exactly where we needed to be. Broken places, broken people. Sometimes that's what lets the light in. Ellie leaned her head on his shoulder. I used to believe healing meant forgetting. Now I think it means honoring what hurt us and building something new. He traced the back of her hand with his thumb, quiet for a moment. We both lost people, lost pieces of ourselves, but maybe that's why this matters. Every scar, every letter, every stubborn hope. It's all part of the story. She smiled. A story worth sharing, a story worth coming home for. Night came slowly, and the bothy glowed with lantern light, laughter drifting across the fields. Some guests lingered long into the evening, swapping tales, singing old songs, adding new pages to the place's history. Finn stood outside, looking at the moon rising over Oakhaven, feeling a peace he'd thought impossible. For so long he'd carried his burdens alone. But now, with Ellie, with the villagers, with Solace always just at the horizon, he finally understood what it meant to belong. As the last guests departed, Finn and Ellie walked once more around the property, checking the doors, collecting empty cups, folding the chairs. They stood for a while beneath the old oak tree, arms around each other, watching the shadows shift on the moor. Thank you, Ellie whispered, for saving me. Again and again. He laughed softly. You saved me too. We brought each other back. They stood together, listening to the wind in the grass, the distant call of an owl, and the quiet hoofbeats of Solace as he moved through the darkness, a wild guardian watching over all that had been rebuilt. Inside, they sat with a pot of tea and reread the letter Ellie's mother had left for her. Words about forgiveness, about the impossibility of running from your story, about the necessity of coming home. Maybe we only heal by sharing our stories, not burying them. Ellie folded the letter and set it beside her cup. What do you think we should do next? Finn smiled, eyes shining. We keep building, keep listening, keep welcoming whoever needs a place to rest, and we remember, every day, that we're not alone. They made their way upstairs, hearts light, the house quiet but for the sighing of the wind and the slow, steady beat of hope. Underscore, 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 a lesson for every listener. As dawn stretched over the fields and the wildflowers nodded in the breeze, Finn stood at the window, watching Oakhaven wake. He thought of everything he'd lost and everything he'd found. He thought of Ellie's courage, the village's kindness, Solace's quiet wisdom. He realized that life was never about the end of pain, but about what you built with it, about finding meaning in broken places and offering shelter, not just for yourself, but for others who wandered in from the cold. The lesson of Ainsworth's Rest was simple, but powerful. Every scar tells a story. Every person carries burdens no one else can see. But together, with honesty and kindness, we can build something stronger. A new home, a new family, a future full of hope. So, if you're listening and you're carrying your own scars, remember, you're not alone. Your story matters. Your pain can be part of something beautiful if you're brave enough to share it. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and follow for more. Every ending is a new beginning. And sometimes the place you're meant to be is right where your story started all along.